Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. I am Matt Verderame, along with the managing editor of BetSided, Ben Heisler. Heisler, how's it going? What's going on?
What's happening, Verderame? Happy week 8 to you. Feel like it's an ideal time, I think, for the Chiefs to get their bye. So many teams, I feel like, just get screwed either way early in the season, and then you're just stuck fighting your way through an injury-filled rest of the way, or you get it too late when already hurt. Now, at least, you get it in the middle of the season, you get a chance to regroup, knowing that the schedule is going to get a tad bit tougher the rest of the way. But the good news is that your division sucks. So all is well, I think, in Chiefs Kingdom right now.
I got to tell you, I actually look at it. I think their schedule lines up pretty well. I mean, they've already played the Niners, the Bucks, the Bills, one of the Chargers games. And their schedule going forward is a lot of like the Broncos twice with Let's Ride. And then you got the Raiders
That's
again,
true.
which could be a tough game depending upon, who needs what week 18. The Texans, Seattle, you get the Jags and the Titans. But I hear you. I mean, look, it's a stretch of 10 straight games. So, you're going to have your bumps and your bruises. You got to overcome that. You got to overcome this Frank Clark 2-game suspension now. Not that should be the end of the world for them against Jacksonville and Tennessee. But, man, listen, I always have thought, like, why doesn't the NFL just have it where every bye week is between, like, weeks, like, 8 and 9? And you just go half and half, and everybody. But I think it's probably because the NFL doesn't want to lose that kind of momentum. So it's like they're just going to lose like a game off the schedule each week.
Right.
But in any event, no, you know what? I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you got to feel pretty good. I mean, they're 5-2 after playing a hard schedule. Truthfully, Heisler, like you said, I mean, one of the big benefits for them is that everybody looked at the schedule at the beginning of the year and went, oh my God, like, look at the end of the year. You get the Rams and the Broncos twice. And now you're like,
game road trip in the middle of that schedule too.
Right, exactly. And now you look at that schedule, like, hey, they get the Rams and they get the Broncos twice. And you're like, all right. So it just goes to show how useless it is when everybody at the beginning of the year is like, oh, the strength of schedule. And then like the actual games happen. You're like, oh, well, as it turns out. And then there's the opposite side of that where Seattle's really good. Or at least really competitive, right? And that was a game at the beginning of the year, like, oh, chalk that up as a win, Geno Smith. And now you're like, oh, okay, well, they actually have to play football. So should be really interesting.
I think so too. There's a lot that we can get to on the course of today's show, and it's always good to have everybody weighing in with us as well. Mentioned from Lucas that according to PFF, the Chiefs do have the 6th easiest remaining schedule in the NFL. And I know that Jeremy's weighing in saying that the Chiefs could go 9-1, 10-0 to finish. I mean, it's funny because we looked at how the first half of the schedule could have lined up, Verderame, and how it matches up with the win total projections for this year. It was hard to find an analyst, I think, and maybe you would disagree with this because I think you're a little bit more tied in, that was basically saying that there's no way that the Chiefs don't win the division with the exception of maybe the Chargers. I don't think there was a buy-in on Denver. We'll say it this way. You and I were certainly in agreement for that.
Sure.
But what was interesting is that I think that the national perception of the Chiefs was that it was going to be tougher to win the division, but they were still going to win the division. Maybe if the Chargers had everything lined up, they would be among the team to take them off the mantle with Tyreek Hill there. What was interesting, though, was that the odds makers kept moving the Chiefs number down from where they opened it. They opened at 11.5. That was the same number as Tampa and the Buffalo Bills.
For the win total.
For the win total this year.
Yep.
If you look at their current win total, it's actually gone up, which makes sense given that they've gotten through this tough part of the schedule. Right now, at most sports books, FanDuel, BetMGM, PointsBet, and Caesars, the Chiefs are at 12.5. However, if you do a little bit of line shopping, which we always recommend on this show to try and find the best number, the Chiefs are at 12 on DraftKings. You have to pay a little bit more. All the other places are either at even odds or plus odds to get the over 12.5. But if you're just looking purely for 12 or more, if you're okay with the push, you can get it at DraftKings right now. So the rest of the way, 5-2 with the 6th easiest schedule according to Pro Football Focus. Do you like that number? Do you think 12 is a reasonable one to get to? Or do you also look at this Chiefs team saying, well, still got a road trip of 3 straight games. They're not necessarily going to need those big games at the end of the season because the division's bad. Where do you come out on this number?
So that's an interesting call because you're right. And that's what I was just going to say was the question's going to be with the Chiefs. Are they playing hard the last week or two of the season? I mean, do they now it also depends what happens in Buffalo because if the Chiefs think that they can catch Buffalo, then they're going to go all out to try to get to that number one seed. I don't think the Chiefs are going to get the number one seed. I think they're going to be the 2 seed. I will say this. I did a video earlier this week on Arrowhead Addict where I laid out my projected wins and losses basically for the rest of the season. I had the Chiefs at 13 wins.
Okay.
So I think the line of 12.5 is right. And I had them winning week 18 against the Raiders in a game that who knows? Like they may not play anybody. Now, I will also say this. I also picked them to lose 2 games in there. I picked them at Cincinnati. And I can't remember what the other one was. Hell, maybe it was even the Raiders game. I thought I picked them to win. But regardless, I mean, it's really hard to pick any team to go 10-0. I don't care who they are. Like, I don't care who they're playing. It's just that's. That being said, I got to tell you, man, if they win their next 2 games at home against Tennessee and Jacksonville, which they should, then they have to me what is the pivotal 3-game stretch. They're at the Chargers, they are home to the Rams, they are at the Bengals. If they somehow come out of that running the table, then they could run the table because then it's Denver twice, it's Seattle at home, it's Houston on the road, and it's the Raiders on the road. I mean, they absolutely could win all 5 of those. They'll be huge favorites every one of the games.
Right.
The hard thing is, are they going to really get on? Come out on? I think they'll beat the Rams at home. It's more of those Chargers Bengals games. I could see them going 9-1. I have them at 8-2. I think they will hit the over, but I think it'll be right around that number.
So if you have them at 13, you might as well take the plus value that's available on the board, knowing that if they get to 12, you lose the bet. Just because you can go ahead, if you make it 50, if you make it $100, you go ahead and win $105 back. So that's the nice part versus betting $100 to then win 80 if it's at -120. So that's one way I think to look at it. But if you're a little bit more concerned, well, the Chiefs still have those occasional letdown games. Maybe they get a little fat and happy at one point.
Colts.
Yeah, Colts is a perfect example. The Rams at some point might start to get healthy, and if that's the case, then they're capable of beating you in a game. Bengals, I think that's probably the one. Burrow has been a really good second half player. I do think there's an aspect to that game of Kansas City whenever there is a revenge factor.
Yes.
The Buffalo game wasn't a revenge factor for them. They beat them in the postseason, even though they lost in the regular season. But Cincinnati, like that's a game the Chiefs have circled. And regardless of who's favorites in that game, and I'd still expect the Chiefs to be a short favorite, depending on how the rest of the season goes. But I'll probably take Cincinnati in that matchup. Or I'm sorry, I'll probably take Kansas City in that matchup, knowing what we've seen out of them this year. The times that you start to really think, okay, and sharps start to move their money towards the opposite team, Chiefs will come back and just destroy them. San Francisco, the case last week, Tampa Bay earlier on in the season. The only real difference was Buffalo, and that game was closer than I think some people even thought it would be.
It's truthfully, it's one of these things where when I was going through the schedule, I'm like, well, I can't pick them to go 10-0. I just can't.
Right.
So I picked them to go 8-2. But if you asked me each individual game, like, do you think they're better? Do you think they should win? I mean, yeah, the answer would be yes, 10 times out of 10. I mean, I think the hardest games on their schedule were the Buffalo game and the Niners game. I mean, I really do. I think those 2 games back to back. And then I know the Bucs right now are playing like crap, but I'd even throw them in. It's Brady. It's great defense. It's Sunday Night Football, that stuff. To me, those 3 games are all harder than any game they're going to play the second half of the season, second half, so to speak, after the bye. And you're right. That is one thing with the Bengals game. They are going to want to score 100 points in that game. Like Mahomes, everybody else, especially Mahomes, that's what happened in that AFC title game. But, it's the question with the Chiefs is just going to be, do they maintain their focus on a week in, week out basis? I'll give you an example. That Jaguars game scares the hell out of me. It's after a primetime game where they're off a bye. Like if I'm Tennessee, I'm mortified of that game. It's a bye week game. It's at home for the Chiefs. It's on Sunday Night Football. Like that's everything you don't want if you're the Titans.
Correct.
If you're Jacksonville, you're like, this is great. Yeah, it's at Arrowhead, which sucks, but it's before they go play the Chargers. It's after a primetime game. It's a noon kick. Like, that's the kind of game I could almost see the halftime show now where I'm just screaming at them because they've just completely sleptwalked and they're down by 6 at halftime. I don't know that they'll lose, but I could see that being one of those games that are holding on for dear life in the final 2 minutes because they screwed around for 50 minutes. And, and that's kind of the way with the Chiefs. Like, not to excuse what happened in Indy, because there's no excuse, it's a disaster. I think there's an element of boredom with them sometimes where they're like, oh, we're going to kill this.
I agree with that.
Like, we're going to kill this team, and it's like, but then when they play a team like the Niners that they know, like, if we don't play well in this game, we're going to get worked. Then they do what they do, and they come out and they just blow them out of the building. Like, where's that every week? Like, you did that every week, you'd be 17-0. But, that's not the way the world works.
I know that Jeremy weighs in saying that the Jaguars game's a Doug Peterson revenge game. Yes, it's going up against a protege of his and Andy Reid, who he learned from. But let's clear something up right away. The revenge game factor, if you leave a team as opposed to getting fired from them, it's not a revenge game, right? Like, that's fair. Like, Doug Peterson has no ill will towards the Kansas City Chiefs, at least as far as I know. Or as far as maybe you know something that I don't. Like, no, I think you're right. He had a great opportunity, and then he went to Philadelphia and he won a Super Bowl. I don't think he looks back on his time in Kansas City going like, man, like, I really was being held back. Right. Philadelphia offered you the job and you left. And then now when he coaches against the Eagles, then it's a revenge game for Dougie, but it's not a revenge game. And also, as our producer Sean points out, the revenge game against the Eagles didn't go particularly well. They covered, I believe, in that game. So it depends on how you look at it, Sean. They didn't win the game, but they certainly did cover. All right, so we talked about it. We talked about it from the win total side. Again, 12.5, depending on where you search and what type of value is on the board. We'll also get into some remaining awards props on the board for Pat Mahomes, for Chris Jones, George Karlaftis. I think you can go ahead and say that anybody that placed a Sky Moore Rookie of the Year bet, you might want to go ahead and tear that one up. I don't see that one cashing anytime soon. But let's talk about the team as a whole for a second. Sure. AFC West, we talked about this on this very show. I believe it was back in either week 3 or week 4.
Yes.
And we said right here on the show, if you don't take the Chiefs at even odds, plus 100 to win the division, I think it was at BetMGM, right now, it's going to be gone, and you're not going to find anything close to it for a long, long time. That's the case, Verderame. Like, the Chiefs, even though the Chargers are just a game behind, they're clear-cut favorites to win the division. I it's the NFL, and weird shit has happened in the past, but right now you're seeing like minus 300, minus 500 to win the division. There's just no good value. Even though you're saying, all right, I'm betting on a sure thing, it just doesn't make sense to consider any odds right now for Kansas City to win the division. Now, if they lose 2 straight after the bye, which isn't going to happen, maybe you start to reconsider it. But right now, that's a clear pass for me. I think you missed your window if you didn't jump on it a little bit earlier on.
I remember that conversation. That was actually right after they lost to the Colts.
Yeah, so it was going into week 4.
Because Denver was 1-2 after playing an easy schedule, and the 1-2, I think they won 2, and the Chargers had just got blown out by Jacksonville, and the Raiders were 0-3. We're like, look, I know they lost to the Colts. Bet it right now because you're never going to get a better value than right now. And we were right, as they are going to win this division, barring catastrophic injury. Yeah, I think the more interesting thing right now is what are their odds to win the AFC?
So their AFC odds, depending on where you look, and again, this is why we encourage you guys to shop around for odds. Again, there's information over at arrowheadaddict.com. If you haven't signed up for any of these sports books yet and you want to shop around, you can take advantage of new client and new referrals, including some of them that are offering like a bonus match bet of up to $1,000. I think PointsBet's doing $500 in free bets. So definitely recommend you guys check that out over at arrowheadaddict.com. Find the best odds that you can, and then go ahead and take advantage of some of the offers that Arrowhead Addict has for you. But the best odds that I've seen right now for the Chiefs to win the AFC are over at Caesars. Caesars Sportsbook has them right now at plus 600. Bills obviously the favorite. They're as low as plus 140 at BetMGM and FanDuel. DraftKings has them at plus 120, PointsBet at plus 150. For the Chiefs, a little bit higher, plus 340 at FanDuel, plus 350 at BetMGM. DraftKings, PointsBet, those are kind of the same area. But by far and away right now, Caesars has the best odds for the Chiefs at plus 600. I got to say, like, it's going to come down to these two teams. Ravens might be able to make a run. Grant, they've led in every game that they've played. The question is whether or not they can close.
They blow every other game that they play. Yeah. But you're right.
I mean, like, they're in, like, if you just watch tape of the Ravens in the first half, you'd think that they're right up there. But gotta play 4 quarters. Bengals are behind them. You can find them as high as 12-1. And then, like, everything else, it's just there's no real value, I suppose, but you don't believe in it. I don't believe in the Dolphins.
No.
I certainly don't believe in the Chargers. Tennessee might win that division, but that's a bad offense and a defense that isn't particularly good either. Like, this is a 3, maybe 4 team race, but let's be honest, this is a 2 team race that if you buy the fact that the Chiefs will get revenge in the AFC Championship game, go get them. And you know what? Maybe wait, because I think this Bills game against Green Bay, everything just feels a little too weird about it for me. Bills are 11.5 point favorites against Green Bay, which either, And I will say this, I know we're getting a little bit off topic, but I'm curious to get your perspective on this. Either the Packers find a miracle way to win this game, or they get blown out by 50.
Totally.
Like, either Rodgers and calling out everybody except for himself somehow rallies the troops, right? Or they all just say F you, go do this yourself, and he gets killed, and it's Buffalo 50, Green Bay 3.
I agree with you and everything you said. And I put out my picks this morning. I'll tweet them out here in a little bit. I picked the Bills to win by like 35 points. I just think this is one of these things. You know what it is? Like, Brady, Burrow, Mahomes, they have a certain, Allen, I think there's a certain leadership quality of, like, we're in this together. Like, Brady, for as much as people hate him because you win so much, he's a great leader. You never hear Brady, like, just throwing all of his guys under the bus.
I mean, right? you did see it a week ago on the sideline.
Screen with the O-line?
He's not doing it in the media, but he ripped them a new one, and it became national news.
He did, but to me, you could hear some of what he said, and he was like, "You guys are so much better than this." Like, he was basically telling them, like, "Look, play to your standard." Mahomes did the same thing against the in the Raiders game. It just wasn't caught on camera, right?
Right.
I don't have any problem with the guy, and I feel like those players don't have any problem with their guy doing that. He's the leader of the team. When you go on a radio show and you're just like, "Listen, I played a great game, but we lost. I don't know what to tell you." Like, come on, man. I mean, really? Like, even if you first of all, by the way, I don't care what he says. I watched that game. He did not play a great game. Second of all, like, even if you truly believe that, like, oh my God, man. Like, so you're right. I agree with you. This is either going to be the week where the one thing, if I'm a Packers fan, I'd hang my hat on in this game. And I always say this about opponents that play the Chiefs. I think it's become true with the Bills too. You know that if you don't play your best game, you're going to get humiliated on national television, right? Like, that's one of the things I think is always hard. Like for example, when the Titans play the Chiefs should kill the Titans. The Titans are going to go into that game with everything on the table because they're going to know, like, if we don't play our A+ game, not only do we have no chance to win, we're going to get killed on national TV. The Packers are going to give everything they've got in that game. The question is, do they look at their quarterback and go, "Yeah, you know what? The hell with this guy, man. I don't want to play with this guy." Or are they just so useless at receiver they can't win? We'll see. But to get back to the odds, your point is true, in my opinion, that this is a 2-team race. I think Cincinnati's the third best team. I respect Cincinnati. I do not think Cincinnati's getting through Kansas City and Buffalo, which they're going to have to do to win the AFC. So if you believe that the AFC is going to come down to Buffalo and Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, regardless of the venue, and you're getting plus 600, that means that basically you're getting 6-1 odds that the Chiefs are going to win that game. I would take that. Like, if I'm the Chiefs, you get 6 cracks, you're telling me they'll win that game once? I would absolutely take the odds. To me, it's a coin flip for either team. So I think that is the best value bet right now.
I think so too. I don't even
agree.
mind. And I don't even mind if you take both sides because you're getting plus odds and plus value on both. 3-1 for the Bills to win the AFC Championship. 6-1 for the Chiefs to win the AFC Championship. Those are, you should be ecstatic that you can find those odds. And again, like as a Chiefs, if you're a Chiefs fan, I understand not wanting to hedge on the other side of it, but maybe you'll feel a little bit better if the Bills end up going to the Super Bowl regardless. So that's where they are for the AFC. If you're looking at it and predicting either of these two teams to win the AFC, the NFC's bad this year. You might as well
just pick the Super
bet
Bowl.
them to win the Super Bowl as well. From what I've seen from the odds for Kansas City, they're plus 650 or plus 700 consensus. It's weird because you think like, all right, most times win the conference half of what it is for the Super Bowl. But that is not the case for Kansas City.
So like if you win the conference, you win the Super Bowl.
That's kind of how the odds makers are laying it out right now. Like the Bills consensus is anywhere between plus 270 and plus 300. Chiefs consensus, again, Caesars had those weird odds for a little bit. We'll see if they stay. They're plus 650 right now at FanDuel, plus 700 at DraftKings, plus 650 at BetMGM, PointsBet, so on and so forth. I think the value play is on the AFC, and you might as well take them on the Super Bowl as well, because unless you think Philadelphia is getting by them, and Philadelphia's a really good team. They're a very, very good team, and the pickup, I think, of Robert Quinn is going to be, I think, a bit understated for them. That's a quality pickup to a very good defense, especially if you're going to generate pressure up the middle, and that's for quarterbacks. Is the danger zone. Like that's just pressure you can't avoid. If it's coming from the outside, you move around in the pocket. If it's coming from inside, there's really nothing you can do. And Quinn can get you from both sides of the field. So that's something I think worth considering, at least for the Chiefs at this point. Let's talk a little bit about awards. I think the one that everyone's going to be trying to debate is between the top three guys. We talked about it being a 2-team race in the AFC. It's a 3-guy race for the MVP of the NFL this year. Josh Allen's the favorite. Consensus plus 125. And then it's some variation of Pat Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. If you're looking for the best odds, again, I've seen it plus 500 at Caesars. FanDuel has Mahomes at plus 450. My only concern about Mahomes for MVP is that I don't know if their schedule is going to do them any favors. Normally, you look at a schedule where he has a chance to really show off, put up some numbers against some big-time teams.
Right.
That's not really going to be the case other than maybe the Rams and the Bengals the rest of the way. Like I almost feel like there's a bit of Mahomes fatigue sometimes. And remember, like this is still a vote from the media, and media tends to go towards a storyline. Josh Allen hasn't won one. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles are undefeated. I feel like Mahomes is swimming upstream, even if he has better numbers by the time the season is done.
Yeah, well, look, also too, and you're right. Like this is an award that certainly goes toward, you'd hope, the best player, but it's also narrative driven. And when he won the MVP, he was the best player in the league that year. But also, he was a comet that year. I mean, he came out of nowhere and was just unbelievable. I actually think in 2020 he probably should have won the MVP, but he didn't, because it was like, well, Rodgers is a great story. And it's like, okay, fine. I mean, I actually thought Mahomes had a better year, quite honestly. This year, he's neck and neck with Allen, but Allen beat him. And Allen's never won the MVP. And the Bills are the best team in football. Now, I think, I think if I had a vote today, I would vote for Josh Allen. If you said, though, what if the Chiefs end up with a better record? Like, what if the Chiefs run the table and they go 15-2 and Mahomes throws for, he's on pace like 5,200 yards. Let's say he throws for 5,100 yards and 48 touchdowns and they run the table. Then, yeah, he's probably the MVP. But I think it takes – the only thing I'll say is if they don't beat out the Bills, but he hits that magical benchmark of 50 touchdown passes, then he might win. Right. Like if he goes for 5,050 again, then maybe. The one other guy I will throw in quickly that I would keep an eye on, I think as a dark horse, is Burrow. Burrow since week one has been unbelievable.
Yes.
So I would throw him in there.
I like that play too. Our Josh Yeowich wrote an article about MVP dark horse picks, and Burrow was the guy that he mentioned as well. He's also available right now for if you want to take a shot on him at 20-1 at a couple sports books if you're looking for some alternative picks. And again, Burrow will have that opportunity in the regular season at home against Kansas City, which could be another opportunity to put the MVP campaign on the map.
Absolutely.
Lamar Jackson is ahead of Burrow at this point. And then after that, it's just a whole lot of bad. Herbert, Cousins had a really strong year, but he's not going to be the MVP. Derek Carr, for some reason, is still on there. Somebody brought up in the chat, Jeremy said, I would put Geno Smith above Hurts. Geno's had a great year, and I think he's going to warrant award consideration. But it's not going to be MVP. Maybe it's offensive player of the year. I think if anything, it's a conversation between him and Saquon Barkley and Nick Bosa for comeback player of the year. Like those are the three guys that are worth considering. I put my money on Christian McCaffrey at the beginning of the season. McCaffrey could still have an awesome year, but Barkley's been ridiculous. Smith has been terrific. And Bosa's been unbelievable. Like Bosa's by clearing away the big favorite right now to take home this award. And again, maybe if the 49ers struggle defensively the rest of the year, some of these other offensive guys come in. But Geno right now, probably not for MVP. There's just too many guys with better numbers on better teams in his path. And I like what Geno's done this year. I like what Seattle's done this year. Right? They look brilliant moving away from Russell Wilson. I was about to say Russell Westbrook. We had a conversation today, which Russ is more cooked between Westbrook and Wilson. You can really make a good argument for either. You
could. The difference is one of them signed for the rest of this season, and one of them signed for 7 more seasons. So tough break. What you could have happen is with Allen Mahomes is one of them wins the offensive player of the year. And the other one wins MVP. I will say this year more than, and I wrote about this last week, I wrote about something close. I wrote about how there's so much mediocrity in the NFL this year and how really there's 3 really good teams and then there's just a bunch of other teams. But with due respect to Philadelphia, who I think is an excellent team, I can't remember a year where you're almost just waiting for one game at the end of the season, where it just feels like all of this is just one massive prelude to Kansas City and Buffalo. And whoever wins that game, that game's going to be billed like it's a Super Bowl.
Well, it used to be like that for Colts and the Patriots a long time ago, except you always knew that the Patriots were going to get the best of Peyton Manning.
Right, and I think that's what it is, right? Like, you're right, but it always felt like, the one game I could think of that kind of gets forgotten because they didn't sustain it, but the one year when the Saints won the Super Bowl and Minnesota and New Orleans that year were just so much better than everybody else.
Yeah.
In the NFC. Now in the AFC had the Colts who were almost undefeated. So there's that. Which, by the way, our guy Jeremy potentially with breaking news. I was literally just checking my phone too because I was like, well, let's see what's going down. Let's see. So
I'm looking at it too. It's on the screen.
Jordan Schultz is reporting that the Chiefs traded
Kadarius. Yeah, they got Kadarius Toney
for Kadarius Toney. Okay.
He was a first-round pick last year. Like, the dude can play. Now, whether or not you're like, it's a swing. And what I find interesting about it is kind of everything that we've been discussing this year about trying to get some of these guys on the field. It's a bit perplexing because
depends what the conditions are in the third.
Yeah, like
that would be my honest opinion of this.
Like, it's bad news for Sky Moore truthers, I think.
I'm also going to be honest. Like, what has Kadarius Toney ever done? What has he ever done?
You're taking a swing with this.
He's played 2 games this year.
You're getting elite, you're getting elite level speed with Toney. You're getting a guy that can return kicks or punts if you want to use him in that regard. Like that's kind of how a lot of people thought they were going to be able to use him. I think he's got good size too. I'll have to look at some of his.
I am trying to confirm this. Not that I'm saying Jordan Schultz needs to be confirmed. So I know Jordan. I like Jordan a lot.
He's a 6 foot 194. So not necessarily the go up and get it guy, which you don't really need because Juju can do that. MVS can go ahead and do that. And he's got good speed. More in the middle of the field. Like you're looking for a clear cut playmaker in an offense that allows playmakers to thrive.
I can confirm that trade. It's accurate.
Okay.
Okay. So.
I can confirm. Cool. Like it's
a compensatory 3rd round pick.
Okay. If I just don't see him being like, unless all of a sudden like you get him figured out come playoff time, and you like it almost kind of reminds me of like maybe Tyreek the first year. Like, all right, this guy's got elite level speed. Let's find small packages to use him really effectively, and maybe try a handful of gadget stuff with him. But you also have Sky Moore for that. So I get the swing at a 1st round pick that the Giants clearly were not interested in, but I don't think it was their need right
now. I don't either. Okay.
But I mean, Veach identifies talent about as well as anybody. And they trust him. I'll be curious to get more as this comes out. Verderame, I got to head out in a minute. So while you're confirming some of this, I'm just going to go over my favorite future bet.
No, go for it. Yeah, because then I got a whole bunch of stuff to do.
Okay. So if you're looking for Mahomes to lead the NFL in passing yards, he's at plus 450 this year. I know that you and I both thought it was worthwhile at the beginning of the season to take a swing on George Karlaftis, but he's the same odds as where he first opened, which is at 20-1. There's 7 guys ahead of him, and I just don't see a scenario in which Sauce Gardner loses this award or where Tyreek Woolen goes behind him. Chris Jones is interesting. He's 80-1 at BetMGM for Defensive Player of the Year. Again, there's just too many players, I think, ahead of him, but a lot of metrics are indicating that Jones deserves and warrants conversation for this award based on the improvements of the Chiefs defense, especially up front, and their ability to stop the run, at least in the early portion of the season. And then I know that Juju, there was some questions about whether or not he's worth it for comeback player of the year. And there's just too many guys ahead of Juju, even if he balls out the rest of the year, that even at 60-1, I'm passing. I might be taking a square bet here for my favorite Chiefs future bet the rest of the way, but I just think the way in which it's set up and the way in which the Chiefs are operating downfield is Mahomes to lead the NFL in passing touchdowns. He's got 20. He's got a 5 touchdown lead on Josh Allen, although Allen might make it up this week against Green Bay, depending on which Packers team wants to show up. But it's 2-1 for a guy that already has a big lead, that's already throwing the ball a bunch, that has as many weapons as you can ask for, with a schedule that favors opportunities to score plenty of points. Yeah, it's 2-1, and it's not as exciting as 6-1 or 20-1 or 80-1 with Chris Jones, but I think it's the smart play the rest of the way. It's an opportunity to get Mahomes at plus value to do something that you expect him to do. So I'm going to take Mahomes to lead the NFL in passing touchdowns at 2-1 is my favorite Chiefs future bet heading into week 8.
I love that. I'm with you. I won't even complicate matters. I'm with you. I agree. I think that's a really, really good call. And now Kadarius Toney's involved. So I don't know what that means, but all right, he has 2 catches this year for 0 yards. Look, I have actually a lot of background now on this, so I can go into look. So my understanding of this from sources here that have literally I'm conversing with currently is Kansas City traded not a conditional 3rd round pick. It is a compensatory 3rd round pick and a 6th round pick for Kadarius Toney. So Kansas City basically felt a ton of extra draft capital. They had 12 picks going into the whole thing. So they still have a lot. Plus, they'll be getting other compensatory picks for guys they lost in free agency this year. But also, the Chiefs are getting a guy who's got, if you include his fifth year option, they have 3 years left in the contract, and it's really cheap. So for the Chiefs, it's an upside play.
It's a bit of insurance too if Juju decides to chase some money.
Correct. Well, Hardman's a free agent. Juju's a
Yep.
free agent, right? I mean, so you have all these guys. Watson's a free agent. Listen, it's one of those deals that if it doesn't work out, you're like, what happened? And if it does work out and Andy Reid can unlock him with Mahomes, you're like, awesome. Great move. So it's an upside play. I get it. I get it. It's an interesting one, but I get it. But all right, look, let's get out of here because I got a million things I got to do now. And I know, obviously, Heisler, you got other things you got to do. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on the bye week and with breaking news nonetheless. So this was good timing. For Ben Heisler, I am Matt Verderame. Thank you for joining us on the Arrowhead Addict podcast, sponsored, of course, by the Kansas City Beer Company. And I'll talk to you again at 4 o'clock this afternoon with Patrick Allen.